Did Hollywood accidentally bury some of its best westerns in the desert sand? In the 1950s, studios pumped out cowboy flicks like popcorn, but the movies that broke the mold? Most of them disappeared faster than a stagecoach in a sandstorm. Why did these gems vanish while their blander cousins survived? Are you ready to discover the stories, scandals, and wild misfires that made these westerns all but invisible? Saddle up. This list is going to dig up the ones you were never supposed to find. The Last Posse, 1953. If you want a western that feels more like a film noir, The Last Posse is your forgotten gold mine. But why did no one see it? In an era when Hollywood wanted clear-cut heroes, this movie served up nothing but gray. Broderick Crawford plays a sheriff who's about as broken as the Old West itself, a man nursing old wounds and even older grudges. The plot? A botched posse hunt in a New Mexico town, told through a Rashomon-style tangle of flashbacks and unreliable narrators. The movie opens with the town boss shot and the sheriff gravely wounded. What follows is less a shootout and more a slow-motion unraveling of everyone's secrets. The posse, assembled to chase down a group of suspected rustlers, quickly devolves into a traveling confessional. Each man tells a different story, and you quickly realize the real villains might not be the ones they're hunting. What makes The Last Posse so compelling and so commercially doomed is its refusal to pick a side. Instead of rooting for the sheriff or the townsfolk, you're left questioning every motive. It's a cynical look at frontier justice, where lawmen and criminals aren't separated by much more than a badge and a hangover. The flashback structure keeps you guessing, and Crawford's performance is pure slow-burn intensity. He's tired, haunted, and angry, all at once. But that same ambiguity torpedoed its success. Audiences in the 1950s wanted a hero to cheer for, not a therapy session with spurs. The studio barely promoted it, and it was quickly overshadowed by more crowd-pleasing fare. The Last Posse faded from memory, only resurfacing decades later among cinephiles who love their westerns twisted and dark. This is the kind of movie you stumble on late at night and can't stop watching. It's got the grit, the shadows, the shattered dreams, everything that makes you wonder how many more classics are still buried out there, waiting to be unearthed. If you're tired of the same old six-shooter stories, The Last Posse is a shot of pure frontier angst. Day of the Outlaw, 1959. Let's talk about snow. Not the pretty Christmas card kind, but the kind that swallows whole towns and turns outlaws into ice-cold monsters. Day of the Outlaw isn't just underrated, it's practically invisible. Thanks to a release that landed like a snowflake in a blizzard, Robert Ryan stars as Blaze Sterrett, a hard-edged rancher feuding with the neighboring farmers, and right from the jump, you know this isn't your daddy's western. Instead of dusty deserts, you get relentless snowdrifts and a town cut off from the world. The tension's already high when a gang of sadistic outlaws, led by Burl Ives as the half-frozen, half-mad Jack Brune, crash into town and take everyone hostage. What follows is less a western and more a psychological siege. Ryan's character, who starts out as the would-be villain, suddenly finds himself the town's only hope, whether he likes it or not. What's wild is how this movie takes all the genre's tropes and buries them in a snowbank. The visuals are stark and claustrophobic. The violence feels real, raw, and desperate. The townspeople don't just cower, they scheme, betray, and fight for survival in ways that feel more like a suspense thriller than a cowboy shootout. There's a sense that any wrong move could mean death, not just from bullets, but from the unforgiving cold. So why did no one watch it? For starters, the movie was made on a shoestring by a director, Andre de Toth, who basically dragged his cast and crew out to the frozen wilds of Oregon, risking frostbite to get the perfect shot. The production was so grueling that actors reportedly lost feeling in their limbs, and more than one scene was shot in a single take just to keep the crew alive. But all that realism made for a movie that felt too bleak, too intense, and too modern for the popcorn crowd. Day of the Outlaw didn't get a big studio push. Released by United Artists with little marketing, it got lost in a blizzard of more traditional westerns. Critics at the time didn't know what to make of it, and audiences who stumbled in expecting white hats and black hats left with frostbite on their souls. Today, though, this film is recognized by directors like Martin Scorsese for what it really is, a survival nightmare with a soul, an existential showdown where nature is the real villain. It's haunting, hypnotic, and absolutely worth thawing out. Day of the Outlaw is proof that the Wild West wasn't just hot, dusty shootouts, it could also freeze you to the bone. The Halliday Brand, 1957. Here's a Western that's more about bloodlines and bitterness than gunslingers and glory. The Halliday Brand dropped in 1957 and instantly sank into the quicksand of forgotten cinema. Why? Because this isn't a story about taming the West. It's about a family tearing itself apart, and nobody comes out clean. Joseph Cotten stars as Ben Halliday, a man coming home to bury his father, the county's iron-fisted sheriff. But don't expect a tearful reunion. The Hallidays are a mess. There's bad blood between Ben and his brother, long-held grudges with their father, and a town that's just waiting for the old man's legacy to implode. The Halliday Brand isn't interested in shootouts. It's interested in the slow burn of generational trauma, justice warped by pride, and how power poisons everything it touches. The cinematography mirrors the mood. Lots of shadowy interiors, bleak plains, and faces you wouldn't trust with your lunch money. Director Joseph Pevney keeps things tight, claustrophobic, and almost oppressive. Even the romance feels dangerous. You get the sense everyone in town is just one harsh word away from pulling a trigger. Why did this film disappear? Simple. It was too real and too raw for 1957. Audiences wanted black hats and white hats, not a messy stew of resentment and regret. Studios barely marketed it, and when it did play, it got overshadowed by bigger, flashier westerns. There's no cavalry charge, no epic standoff, just a slow, inevitable unraveling that's closer to Greek tragedy than cowboy fantasy. But that's what makes the Halliday Brand so fascinating. It's about the kind of pain that lingers long after the last gunshot. If you want a Western that feels less like a comic book and more like a family therapy session with horses, this is your pick. It's rough, it's smart, and it's proof that some of the best stories in the West are the ones we're still not ready to talk about. The Hanging Tree, 1959. What happens when the doctor's just as dangerous as the outlaws? The Hanging Tree serves up a Western with a pulse of psychological drama, and it's been criminally overlooked for decades. Gary Cooper stars as Doc Frail, a man with secrets deeper than the abandoned gold mines dotting the Montana landscape. He's a healer, sure, but he's also a judge, a jailer, and maybe even a hangman. This is not your typical ride into the sunset hero. Set in a feverish mining camp during the gold rush, the story kicks off when Doc saves a wounded thief from a lynch mob. Instead of being thanked, he's resented. The Doc's presence unnerves everyone, not least because he's clearly hiding a tormented past. As he becomes entangled with a mysterious Swiss immigrant and a greedy prospector, the whole settlement edges closer to chaos. Director Delmer Daves gives the film a haunted, almost gothic vibe. Shadows linger, tempers flare, and trust is in shorter supply than clean water. Cooper's performance is a lesson in wounded stoicism. You can feel every scar and regret etched in his face. Supporting turns by Mariah Schell and Carl Malden only raise the stakes, turning what could have been a standard Western into a pressure cooker of suspicion and second chances. So why did no one watch it? Timing, for one. The Hanging Tree was released when Westerns were flooding the market, and studios didn't know how to sell a movie that was part psychological thriller, part frontier drama. Critics admired it, but the lack of action compared to its peers made it a tough sell for Saturday matinee crowds. It slipped into obscurity, appreciated only by diehards and Gary Cooper completists. But this is a film about second chances, not just for its characters, but for the audience too. Its central question, can you outrun your past, or does it eventually find you swinging from the nearest tree, feels as fresh now as it did in 1959. The Hanging Tree is more than a Western. It's a chilling, slow-burn masterpiece that deserves another shot. No Name on the Bullet, 1959. Here's a Western, where the deadliest thing isn't the gun, it's paranoia. No Name on the Bullet should be a household name, but ask most people, and you'll get blank stares. Why? Because this movie is all about slow-burning suspense and the darkest corners of human nature, not galloping horse chases or barroom brawls. Audie Murphy, usually the good guy, turns the genre inside out as John Gant, a gunman with the calm menace of a coiled rattlesnake. Gant rides into a sleepy frontier town, not to shoot the place up, but just to wait. The townsfolk know he's a hired killer, but not who he's after. The result? Pure panic. Every citizen starts wondering, am I the target? What have I done wrong? Old sins bubble up, accusations fly, and the whole town turns on itself faster than you can say, draw. Director Jack Arnold treats the story almost like a psychological experiment. The camera lingers on faces, watching fear bloom and reason wither. The gunfights are few, but the tension is thick enough to cut with a Bowie knife. Murphy's performance is a revelation. Still, watchful, almost polite, but you know he can explode at any second. Why did No Name on the Bullet vanish? Universal barely promoted it, unsure how to market a Western with more suspense than shootouts. Audiences who wanted fast action left disappointed, and critics didn't know what to make of its mix of morality play and noir. The movie faded from screens, but its legacy quietly grew among fans of psychological drama. Now, with fresh eyes, you can see its brilliance. The real question isn't who's going to die, it's who deserves it. No Name on the Bullet is a thinking person's Western, and maybe that's why it vanished in a crowd of louder, dumber movies. If you want to see what happens when the real villain is guilt itself, this is the one to track down. Jubal Namis. Think Othello, but swap Venetian palaces for wild Wyoming and velvet cloaks for dust-caked Stetsons. Jubal is the Western you didn't know you needed, a dramatic powder keg packed with betrayal, lust, and jealousy, all simmering beneath the surface of a cattle drive. Glenn Ford stars as Jubal Troop, a mysterious drifter whose only goal is a fair shot at honest work. But the world of this movie is never honest, and fate never gives a fair shot. When Jubal stumbles onto the ranch of kindly Shep Horgan, played with old-school warmth by Ernest Borgnine, it looks like he's finally found a place to belong. But enter Rod Steiger, in a career-best turn as Pinky, a man whose name sounds harmless, but whose heart is pure venom. Pinky seethes with envy as Jubal earns the respect and trust of Shep and the affection of the rancher's wife, May. The tension on this ranch isn't just about cattle rustlers, it's a three-alarm fire of suspicion, resentment, and secret longing. Director Delmer Daves uses the western landscape as a pressure cooker. The mountains loom like silent judges, and every gust of wind feels charged with secrets. There are no simple heroes here, just wounded souls looking for meaning, clashing in a place where trust is always in short supply. Ford plays Jubal as the ultimate outsider, soft-spoken but steely, desperate for peace but dogged by trouble at every turn. The supporting cast is electric, with Valerie French giving May a vulnerability that's tragic and painfully real. So why did Jubal never break through? In 1956, studios were busy promoting spectacle westerns loaded with action and technicolor dazzle. Jubal, with its moody pace and tangled adult relationships, didn't fit the formula. The studio wasn't sure how to sell it, so they barely tried. Audiences looking for a straightforward good versus evil showdown walked out scratching their heads. But here's the kicker. Jubal is now seen as a blueprint for every smart, character-driven Western that followed. If you want to watch the genre grow up, if you want a story where the real shootout happens in the heart, this is the film to find. Don't sleep on it. The Wonderful Country, 1959. If the Western genre had a poet, it would look a lot like The Wonderful Country. This one trades gun-blazing action for quiet longing, complicated loyalty, and wide, aching landscapes. Robert Mitchum plays Martin Brady, an American outlaw who spent years riding the borderlands between Texas and Mexico, always running, always looking for a place to belong. From the opening frames, you know this isn't your standard cattle drive. Brady is a gun for hire caught between two worlds. When he's sent back into Texas on a dangerous mission, he's forced to confront the life he left behind, a lawless youth, old betrayals, and the gnawing sense that he's never truly home anywhere. The movie's not afraid to get moody. It lingers on faces lost in thought, sunrises that promise nothing but trouble, and dusty streets where no one's hands are clean. Director Robert Parrish lets the story breathe. The action comes in bursts, sudden, realistic, and always costly. Mitchum's performance is a masterclass in understated pain. He's a man haunted by regret, moving like a ghost through a world that doesn't forgive or forget. Julie London, as a lonely rancher's wife, gives the film its emotional pulse, and the supporting cast, including Pedro Armendariz and Gary Merrill, add layers of grit and warmth. Why didn't anyone see it? Blame the studios again. The Wonderful Country came out during a tidal wave of flashier westerns and was marketed with all the enthusiasm of a flat tire. It wasn't violent enough for the action crowd and too melancholy for Saturday night popcorn. Critics shrugged and the film faded from sight. But for those who stumble onto it, The Wonderful Country is a revelation. It's about the spaces between borders, the loneliness of never quite fitting in, and the hope that somewhere, somehow, redemption might be possible. Watch it if you're in the mood for a Western that aches rather than shouts. You won't forget it. Run for the Sun, 1956. Some Westerners don't wear their cowboy boots on the outside. Run for the Sun is a high-octane chase movie with Western DNA, set not on the prairie, but in the Mexican jungle, where civilization ends and survival becomes personal. Richard Widmark stars as Mike Latimer, a reclusive novelist hiding from the world until the world, in the form of trouble, comes looking for him. The story kicks off when a savvy journalist, played by Jane Greer, tracks Latimer down for an exclusive interview. What should have been a simple scoop turns into a nightmare when their plane crashes in the jungle. Instead of friendly villagers, they find themselves hunted by a pair of sinister fugitives, one a disgraced British officer, the other an ex-Nazi, both hiding from justice and desperate to keep their secrets buried. What unfolds is a breathless cat-and-mouse game where the stakes are survival and trust is just another word for wishful thinking. Director Roy Bolting keeps the tension tight. Every scene is a race against time, with danger lurking behind every tree. Widmark is all raw nerves and survival instinct, while Greer brings intelligence and grit, refusing to be just a damsel in distress. The villains, played by Trevor Howard and Peter Van Eyck, are chillingly calm, making every encounter a potential death sentence. Why did Run for the Sun vanish? Because it didn't fit the Western box. Audiences weren't ready for a movie that mashed up adventure, noir, and frontier justice in the jungles of Mexico. Released by United Artists, it got lost among more traditional horse operas and never found its crowd. Critics didn't know what to make of it, and the movie faded, unloved and unseen. But here's the thing. Run for the Sun is the rare Western where the frontier isn't a place, but a state of mind, where being hunted is as terrifying in a jungle as on the open plains. It's suspenseful, stylish, and still packs a punch. If you're looking for something truly different, run toward this one. Friendly Persuasion, 1956. Forget everything you think you know about Westerns. Friendly Persuasion isn't about blazing gunfights or lone sheriffs standing tall. It's about a Quaker family, their unbreakable code, and the wild world pushing in from all sides. Gary Cooper leads as Jess Birdwell, a peaceful Indiana farmer whose only weapons are wit, kindness, and stubborn faith in doing right. On the surface, this looks like a gentle family drama, but dig a little deeper, and you'll find it's one of the bravest Westerns ever made. What makes it radical? Friendly Persuasion dares to ask if violence is ever worth it, even when the world demands you draw your gun. Set during the Civil War, it follows the Birdwells as their idyllic life is shaken by Confederate raiders. The threat is real and the choices are agonizing. Should you protect your family at any cost, or hold to your principles even if it means letting go? Cooper's performance is all quiet strength and buried turmoil. He's a man fighting his own instincts as much as the enemy. Director William Wyler crafts every scene with warmth and a pinch of mischief. There's humor in the family's daily squabbles, beauty in the fields of golden corn, and heartbreak when violence finally arrives. Dorothy McGuire, as Jess's wife Eliza, is the conscience of the film, her resolve and compassion making every choice matter. Even the kids have story arcs that pack an emotional punch. So why did this movie miss the Western Hall of Fame? Blame it on timing and audience expectations. Released during an era when action and spectacle ruled, Friendly Persuasion was dismissed as too soft, too talky, too gentle. Cooper himself doubted its appeal and never watched the finished product. Critics gave it respect, but crowds wanted the next big shootout. The film faded, only to be rediscovered by those who saw its courage and quietness. Today, Friendly Persuasion is a cult favorite for anyone willing to see the West as more than a battleground. It's about how true grit sometimes means standing your ground without ever raising your fist. If you want a Western with a heart as big as the frontier, this one's your ticket. Broken Arrow, 1950. You want a Western that shook the genre to its core? Broken Arrow is where it started. Before this film, Native Americans were almost always the faceless enemy, props for the hero's glory. But here, James Stewart plays Tom Jeffords, a scout determined to bring peace between white settlers and the Apache. The story, based on real events, is as gutsy as anything the decade produced. Right from the opening, Broken Arrow feels different. Stewart's character tries to learn the Apache language, to understand their ways, and to treat them as people, not just obstacles. His friendship with the legendary Chief Cochise, played by Jeff Chandler, isn't just a plot device, it's the emotional core. The film goes where most Westerns of the era feared to tread. It makes you question who's right, who's wrong, and if those lines even matter in a world this complicated. Director Delmer Daves treats the desert like a character, wide and unforgiving, but full of promise. There's tension, romance, and tragedy, especially when Tom falls in love with an Apache woman, Sonsia Ray. Their relationship is honest, bittersweet, and a direct challenge to the prejudices of the time. The film isn't perfect. Casting white actors in native roles is a flaw by modern standards, but for 1950, this was nothing short of revolutionary. Why did Broken Arrow go underappreciated for so long? Blame it on the controversy. Many moviegoers weren't ready for a Western that painted Native Americans as heroes in their own right. Some critics hailed its boldness, but others saw it as too political, too risky, too far from the crowd-pleasing formula. It made money, but it never got its due respect until much later, when film historians finally recognized how it opened the door for every thoughtful Western that came after. If you want to see the West through new eyes, to walk the hard road between peace and conflict, Broken Arrow is your map. It's a landmark, and it's long past time it got a hero's welcome. There you have it, the lost and overlooked Westerns of the 1950s that rewrote the rules. Which hidden gem will you watch first? Tell us in the comments. If you loved uncovering forgotten treasures, hit subscribe, share with a fellow movie fan, and stay tuned. In Hollywood, the best stories are always hiding in plain sight. What will you discover next?